We are in the beautiful city of Kigali, where we are discussing a host of issues including technology, sustainable development goals, and how the global south can speak to each other, learn from each other, and come together to address some of the issues that challenge our society. Today we will be discussing on privacy. As more and more societies adapt towards a technology future, we are also seeing a lot of people collect a lot of data, and in some ways they say data is the new oil. So today I have with me Ephraim. He's a lawyer and he works with an organization called Article 19, which in Kenya is trying to look at issues of technology rights, especially around privacy, around freedom of speech, and understand in our conversation how what is happening in Kenya and what is happening in countries like India and how we are dealing with privacy, etc., and see where we can find commonalities in our experiences. So welcome, Ephraim.
Thank you so much.
If you could tell us a little more about where is the privacy debate in Kenya as of now?
So in Kenya, just like most of Africa, so before getting into Kenya specifically, I would mention just Africa. We have only 24 countries that have comprehensive data protection laws. So my position has always been that whenever we are progressing in development, we need also to remember to protect our own people. So if a company is investing in technology and in the same process making it, taking advantage of the citizens' data, like that should not be the case. So we are, so in Kenya specifically, we are trying, or the government has been trying to come up with a database that has biometrics, geolocation data of citizens. It is linked to their national ID, it is linked to their telco, it is linked to their banks. So a centralized database of all citizens, which is, it has its risks because we don't have a comprehensive data protection law. And at the same time, the Kenyan government in 2014 and 2015 partnered with the Chinese government company Huawei to come up with street level surveillance, which can be enabled to have facial recognition, which has its own challenges legally and potential breaches. We've had data breaches in the past, so it's something which might happen again. So there is that risk, not just for Kenya, but also for other countries, Zimbabwe, which is also trying to come up with something similar, and a few other countries. So people try to rush towards technology as a silver bullet, but then not realizing that there are some risks which can happen. So that's something which we are trying to deal with at the moment in Kenya and the rest of the region in Africa.
So wow, that sounds pretty worrying. I mean, that kind of data collection. So before I want to ask you something else, why is the government wanting to gather so much of data, including geolocation? What's the rationale and what is the reasoning that they're offering to collect this kind of data?
So the reasoning is the same language to fight crime, to know what every citizen is doing. So if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be scared, among other reasons. So basically it's just the same narrative across the region, just that what is not being explained clearly is the risks of that happening.
See, another challenge that we are facing, for example, in India, this is a bit of a challenge. Many people are not able to understand and articulate their need for privacy. While there is an innate feeling that yes, privacy is very, very critical, but they're not able to visualize it as privacy alone. They're able to see the benefits and they're able to appreciate those benefits and imbibe those, but they're not able to exactly articulate their need for privacy. Do you find that challenge also happening in your country and in the region?
So yes, the challenge is, I'll start from when the African Union, which brings together all African governments and to one body, when the charter was being drafted, there was no word privacy included.
When was this? In the past?
In the past.
When it was originally being set up?
When it was being set up in 80s, 70s, the word privacy was not included in the charter. So even litigating privacy at the international level has been a bit difficult. But then Article 5 of the Banjul Charter there's the word dignity. So dignity has been interpreted sometimes by court to mean privacy, but then it didn't go far enough, because at the moment when it was being drafted, African states were coming from colonization. The focus at the moment was not on that, but then over time the word privacy is being seen in other legal documents. So even explaining privacy to your grandmother back in the village, or someone, like, it's something which, it's there, yes, people dress for privacy, but then how do you explain that word privacy? There is no that word privacy even in local ethnic languages specifically. It's a bit far-fetched, but the word dignity is there. So trying to link that up, it's been a bit of a difficult education journey. Even looking online, the number of people who've published on privacy issues in Africa pre-2014, there were very few people working on the issues. So it's something, not that it's not important, it's important, but explaining that as compared to dignity, trying to find language that resonates with the people. Yeah.
Also, like in India, the position on privacy from a constitutional fundamental right was not very clear. And so far, the Supreme Court's judicial precedent was that it is not a fundamental right. However, in August 2017, a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court sat together and passed a unanimous judgment saying that yes, privacy is a fundamental right. So that clarity is now very, very clear and laid down in stone by the Supreme Court with one of the biggest benches possible, and has now established that yes, it is a fundamental right. What is the constitutional and legal position in this region?
So similar, there's been sound judgments. The Kenyan High Court in 2016 passed a really nice.
Is that the top court of Kenya?
That's not the top court. That's the Constitutional Court. But their interpretation has weight because they're the first instant constitutional interpretation.
And this was a large bench, or?
I can't remember the composition of the bench, but it was a good judgment. Similar to 2018, there's been 2 nice judgments around privacy. So privacy is recognized as a fundamental right, but not at the Supreme Court level. But I think it's something which is very recognized. And also recently there was a case involving the Deputy Chief Justice and how some evidence about how it was obtained illegally. Kind of the case didn't delve so much into privacy rights, but somehow it gave a direction of how the Court of Appeal and maybe the Supreme Court might rule when it comes to privacy issues. And then additionally, the Ethiopian court has had a very interesting ruling on privacy. Despite challenges in Ethiopia under the previous government, the Ethiopian court had an interesting ruling on privacy, for example, use of images obtained, that there should be consent. So these principles on consent, informed consent, adequacy, protection, legitimacy, among others, the 13 principles, like, are being recognized, though not explicitly, by courts across the region, similar to Nigeria and others. There's been a few nice rulings in the 55 member states that Africa is part of. Yeah.
So, but when it comes to privacy, we are also seeing that the biggest fear is actually from the state, because if the state uses the lack of privacy to turn the state into a surveillance state, and that poses significant danger not only to people but also to democracy. And yet the state continues to push the boundaries on that. So where is the status now? What are the protections against the state, or are the agencies which are authorized, usually these are intelligence or law enforcement agencies which are authorized to take this kind of data, are there any constitutional and legislative checks and balances on them?
So Africa is not homogeneous. Though I compare and contrasts. There's some places where there's that balance, checks and balances. For example, I mentioned about the Kenyan case involving the Deputy Chief Justice, where the court found that the evidence was obtained illegally by the intelligence. But then there's some places where that is not the case. So it depends. It's not homogeneous, but we are headed in the right direction. I am very optimistic for Africa. I'm very optimistic despite the challenges. I'm very optimistic that we are headed in the right direction, and very soon we might be a global force when it comes to these issues and in this digital age and in this digital economy world. Yeah.
My last question. So are the tech companies which are hoping to profit by collecting more and more data, how much are they cooperating in the policy space, or are you finding a lot of resistance from them?
So, for example, in Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana and South Africa, we've positively engaged with both government and private sector and civil society and academia. So they are coming to the table. They are having nice conversations, cooperations. So it depends also on the landscape. That's where most of the corporations have offices, and now Kigali. And so hopefully, if corporations keep engaging in that spirit, we will be able to engage better. But that is dependent also on leadership at the time. That is there, the corporation. Sometimes with change of leadership, there might be change in management style. For example, Orange was bought out of Kenya. There's changes in how they are approaching policies right now as compared to when they were part of Orange group of companies. Yeah.
So as Ephraim also pointed out that when it comes to privacy, there are certain issues in how people articulate it, but there are also issues in terms of how do we limit the state, because the biggest fear when it comes to privacy is from the state. So obviously these are difficult questions, but these are very essential questions if the democratic nature, which is a rights-based approach, has to be maintained. And with that, we will close this conversation, but we hope you will continue to engage with us and show us how we can develop this and deepen this conversation. Thank you.